Okay, we're jumping back in with consent and confidentiality, our big considerations. So we're still kind of on professional ethics. Okay. Consent. This is a really big one. And this is something that if you've had the opportunity to work with people more casually in the past, consent is something that we definitely get a bit of an intuition for, in that we have respect for our friends, our family, the people that we're touching, and we don't necessarily want to push into their boundaries anyway if we have like a healthy kind of self-construct where our sense of self isn't coming from like what other people let us do to them, right? But it's a topic that we do have to hit formally in the course of massage therapy training, licensure, informed consent. So when somebody puts themselves on your books or calls in, gets you to put them on their books, then there is a certain expectation that is set up of that you are going to deliver a service in exchange for a fee, and they're automatically agreeing to that. We also want to put this in writing generally. We want it to be as explicit as possible, because so many people are coming to us with very little experience of this kind of professional relationship and access to professional touch. It's so distinctive and unique in some ways. People can go a long time with nobody touching them at all, and they can consume a lot of services and medical care without having very much physical contact. When you go to the doctor, of course, the doctor's gonna do some overall assessment, and they might do like a reflex check on your knee. They're usually gonna talk you through it. If they don't, we tend not to like them, right? The care providers who are brusque with us, that are kind of treating us like something on their assembly line to click through and just do the things to and get you moving on, we tend to have an aversion to those types of practitioners, and that phrase bedside manner really comes in, where we think of how people who are providing care conduct themselves in that process of providing care. So informed consent specifically is our kind of formalized theory of how we navigate the process of creating sensible expectations with our clients and delivering on those expectations. When you work with people who are not receiving a lot of other touch, any kind of touch can be fairly startling, right? When we're in a more touch-deprived season of life for whatever reason, anything that somebody else does to our body is going to register in the nervous system pretty loud. If you're getting a lot of massage, then it is probably not going to hit quite as loud in your system in terms of the potential to be startled, right? You'll be adapted and acclimated to that sense of experience. So with your clients, you'll have this huge range of people who are reactive to non-reactive to whatever you're doing. And the more that we can be clear ahead of time about any expectations, the more comfortable they're going to feel, the more relaxed they're going to be able to sense your bedside manner and have a reasonable response that activates more relaxation in their system instead of creating more anxiety. And this is the kind of polar dynamic that we're always working in. Are we moving a person's nervous system towards anxiety or towards relaxation, right? So a lot of this is verbal. A fair amount of it can become nonverbal, and especially with repeating clients, the expectation builds up where they've already had the experience of you touching them in a certain sequence or in a set of ways. So you're not going to necessarily every single treatment forever be like, can I touch you now? Can I touch your leg? Can I touch your arm, etc.? They're coming in with the expectation that you are going to touch them, right? I'm thinking of some of the more extreme cases where, especially when you're working with people who have any kind of history of violent or sexual trauma, that reactivity is going to be a lot higher, and the expectation, the need for verbal communication is going to go up. For people who are already really acclimated, it can hit a bracket of almost being like annoying to have to talk about it too much because they're trying to go into a relaxed cognitive state where they're not verbal processing so much, and every time you talk to them, they're having to like make a decision, and so that can create a sense of distance. So being able to read where your client is at and where your professional therapeutic relationship with your client is at is really important to capture that like constant effort towards moving them towards relaxation, right? And it'll just hit different people differently.
It's like when two guys wearing suits come into a bar and they're talking to each other. They're gonna get scotch and they don't want a whole sales pitch.
Right.
They just want the pour.
Right, that they want to stay in their experience, and that's broadly applicable. People want to stay in the experience that they've chosen. And being able to read that is a big piece of being able to provide the level of service that retains your clients, that operates for your clients' highest good, and that operates for your highest good, both as a clinician building your own clinical experience and as a human being building your life on your profession, right? Okay. So informed consent is something that we can really put a lot of impact on in the early window of the client relationship. You can establish a lot about the expectations that your clients can bring to you with the material that you send them before they show up in the clinic. And there is, like, generally a solid professional practice is going to have a fair amount of written agreements that are available for the client to read before they even show up, so that by the time that you're talking to them face to face, it's pretty predictable for them, that they're not like surprised by any of that. So that might be available to them on your website. It might be set up for maybe you're operating it mechanically yourself every time, or maybe you have an automatic system that emails them. But you want to, whatever you're doing, you want to make it as easy as possible for them to get a good grip on what they're signing up for before you're asking them to get on the table. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So we can definitely pull out some like more specific examples when you're getting closer to the point of actually setting up your practices, and you can feel free to just like look at my website. It has all of my documents are on there or whatever. You can kind of get on and see examples of that. There are a lot of other people that have all of their documents set up online, so it is smart, honestly, to just pick somebody who either you would see or you've already seen, somebody who kind of resonates with you as a clinician, and just lay eyes on their documentation and kind of get inspired by that. Also, if you're using any kind of like automated scheduling system or point of sale system to manage your business side of your practice, a lot of times they'll have some pre-written examples that you can go in and just adjust for, you know, have the potential fees that you might charge or no-show fees or whatever, like adjust all of that to your own specifications. But it's not hard to find that. You can even easily just Google examples of massage therapy intake forms and get a pretty good view of that. So lots of those resources are available. You guys feel comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
It's a very specific scenario.
Specific question.
I wanted to know if you had any stories about people coming in not speaking English very fluently we anticipate that because of online interaction versus like what it's like in the moment?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really relevant. People who are possibly more challenging to communicate with fully because of language issues or cognitive issues or whatever is going on, where you may have a concern whether they're fully understanding and buying into what you're saying. Of course, the written material is really helpful for that, to give people an opportunity to look at it in their own time and kind of process their questions, get those questions ready. You may also sometimes have people bring in a translator and have a relative or a social worker or whatever they have access to that can help them navigate that. And of course, you're going to end up leaning on nonverbal even more heavily in those cases, that like where with some people you may just say, you know, undress your comfort level, whatever you want to wear is fine, and I'll provide privacy with this sheet the entire time, whatever your set of kind of intake lines are. You may find yourself slowing down quite a bit, using more gestures, just like being really clearly indicating like these are the hooks for your clothes, and just using simpler language a little bit.
I made a Spanish intake form because Maryland, like so many people, and I also live Spanish, so people are coming to me.
People will guess that you're.
I told you about the line I had to learn at work. That word test out that I allowed. Everyone comes in the wrong door, but yeah, I made a Spanish one, and I like learned like alejar, acercar, abduction, adduction, like simple stuff because I'm anticipating.
Sure.
I want to be able to respond well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it'd be helpful. And that is absolutely something that really adds to your special offering as a practitioner. If you can provide a more complete experience in another language, to be able to use Spanish and work with people who are more comfortable using more Spanish.
That's good news that it's like you can work with it. It sounds like people are more likely to just work with them rather than to refer them somewhere else. But I think knowing the language for contraindications would be the most important there.
Yeah, being able to, if you're going to directly work with somebody whose English is super limited, you want to definitely be in the place where you can ask the big screening questions, establish that they have not had surgery for cancer, or that they
aren't diabetic.
That you're going to need to be able to communicate on that. And you may choose to use more forms and to give, more written material to kind of release your headspace from having to, as you're building up enough fluency with the clinical language specifically, to have more visuals and more forms, more written material that you can point to and kind of use that to help navigate in your clinical setting. So this is the sequence of kind of what you need to have cleared in the informed consent process in order to kind of establish your standard of care, create your intake processes. You want to be able to provide a general explanation of what massage is, make sure that their concept of what massage is a reasonable match for what massage you're actually going to provide. You do want to be able to communicate in your writing ahead of time and be prepared to comfortably answer any questions that they have about your scope of practice, that if they're asking what you could possibly do, if they're, sometimes you'll have people, for instance, who ask about like if you can do adjustments of specific bones. And so you want to be able to comfortably and fluently explain that you're not going to aim to change the relationship of one bone to another bone, although you may often get a positive result on the relationship between those bones if you address soft tissue through that joint region, right? So being able to explain stuff like that. Written information, again, is kind of the gold standard for making sure that they have a chance to review that and come up with their own questions ahead of time. You need to be able to communicate your specific business and professional policies. So this will fall on you if you're operating a private practice. If you're inside of a spa setting or whatever where the standard is already set, then you just need to be able to comfortably communicate what the standards are. But you may find yourself generating, having to make decisions about like how late is too late. If somebody shows up 5 minutes after their assigned treatment time, do you charge them a fee? Do you extend their treatment time so that they get that solid 60-minute window? Do you cut off at the time that you would have ended regardless? Is that different between 5 minutes and 15 minutes? Will you sit in the treatment room waiting to see if they'll show up with no communication into 20 minutes? These are just decisions that land on you, that you get to make. And I would say any particular decision is fine. Just know that how you set those protocols and policies is going to affect which clients end up coming to you. And that people who have a harder time following through on their own expectations of themselves are going to gravitate more towards therapists who have more relaxed policies. People who don't worry about getting assessed a fee, either they don't worry about money or they don't worry about being able to execute that timeline, are going to gravitate more towards people with stricter policies on the business side. And it's completely fine for you to decide which clientele you want to work with and design your business policies around that population. Does that make sense? The biggest caution there would be inconsistency, that you're going to confuse people if you're adjusting your business policies to adapt to people all the time, and you'll end up putting yourself in a position of resenting your clients, which really, really sucks. If you're creating so much variability that they're having expectations that you will adapt to whatever randomly they do. Whereas being consistent with whatever your fee schedule is, whatever your timeline schedule is actually going to make you a lot more comfortable. It's going to make you a more effective, caring, nurturing provider to be able to set a hard boundary and say no to the small fragment of people that might trespass on your intuitive boundaries, right? And it's also going to provide a healthier experience for the client when they can rely on and expect. Sometimes people will spiral out, guys, and like, it's not on you if somebody is like gives themselves a panic attack because they realized that they didn't give themselves enough time to drive between their last location, and then they just short out and they're like, I would rather pay the $70 no-show fee than look in this human's face. That's fine. Like, set policies that allow for how chaotic some people are going to be and that protect you enough that you can feel okay about, like, that person made that decision, they'd rather pay the money than have the accountability. Cool. Like, they just bought freedom from accountability. Completely up to them. It's allowed.
A concept.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, you could see on the flip side, like, if you really don't care, you're just going to be like bopping around in your garden before and after, so it doesn't matter when they show up and they come 40 minutes late, and you're like, fine, whatever. Like, cool, work with those people. They need massage therapy. But don't be confusing. Does that make sense?
Be consistent.
Be consistent.
Stick to the policy you set.
Yes. Absolutely. Okay. And then you really want to give the client and yourself an experience of signing a specific informed consent. You want the client to have that internal moment of deciding, I am taking this risk of consuming this service, working with this person, and I accept my own risk in this process. And the risk that they're taking, of course, is that they might not like you. or that they might not get as much change in their body as they were hoping for when they decided to motivate themselves to schedule a massage, that they may not be able to make it, or they might get sick at the last minute or whatever. These are the risks that we all are taking all the time in every sphere of life. And you cannot afford to absorb the margin of error for every person that comes into your clinic. And so giving them the clarity of what risk they have signed up for, what their margin of error is going to be versus what you will pick up. Like, I'll tell my people, if I'm late, if I take too long turning the sheets over, I'm not going to adjust the time. I will go the 60 minutes into the next treatment time. I'll absorb that buffer. Sometimes I do. Like, we're not always on the top of our game, or we might have something happen that we didn't expect, and that's okay. You just figure out what is your margin of error and how do you carry that yourself, and what is their margin of error and how do you never pick that up if you can get out of it, you know? Like, just be clear. And it's a learning and growing experience for them too. Especially when they register that, like, you're a safe person that they can make mistakes with. They can blow off an appointment and just pay the fee, or not pay the fee because you don't charge a fee, or whatever you decided. Like, when they know what to predict from you, they actually are capable of a higher level of predictable behavior themselves. You like that?
That resonates with a story I have where at the bar I was working at, third one I worked at, which was not well managed at all, no bar manager.
Mm-hmm.
The GM was bar manager, and she had never bartended before. Really quick story, I swear. This couple that had been banned from another location owned by the same company came in, and I was like really not feeling confident in that place. And he had these clothes that were wet, and he was like, "So she has to go to work soon," talking about his girlfriend. Do you have like a washer in the back?
Right?
Or do you have a dryer? Because she has these like wet clothes. And I was like just so befuddled. It was a restaurant. We had a kitchen back there. We didn't have a dryer.
Right, you're not a laundromat.
I'm not a laundromat.
Exactly.
But I was so like caught up in the professionalism
Exactly.
that I was like, oh, I can go check. Like, or I was trying so hard to
Right.
get myself around their premise that it's like, if you don't have a consistent, the point of that is that if you don't have a consistent workplace,
Yeah.
anything goes.
Yeah.
You just get confused.
It can be chaotic, exactly. And so then you get that kind of the double-edged sword of professionalism, right? Of that professionalism is not doing whatever your client wants.
No.
Professionalism is executing the function of your profession in a protected enough way that you can do it again and again. You can do it as many times as you've already obligated yourself to do it. And I do sometimes have, encounters where, for whatever reason, maybe it's a close friend and I've got a little bit of dual relationship contamination and I'm just willing to take the hit for that, or whatever it is. Sometimes something happens where you just make a judgment call, and it's okay. Like, you can make mistakes, you can make changes, you can ask for adjustments, you can revise all of your written material and send it to your whole email list at once and be like, you know what, I'm gonna actually charge you guys $20 more than I used to for no-show fees. Like, all of these things. It's just the baseline of how predictable can you be as a professional, and that's gonna determine who comes into your professional sphere. Okay. Let's dabble into confidentiality. Super important. We have a big kind of elephant in the room when we get into the confidentiality conversation is HIPAA. People will say things about HIPAA all the time. It can be really interesting. No, it's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. We call HIPAA. And specifically, it's a law that establishes standards of what is the right to privacy that your clients or for other practitioners, patients, who, when those people give their medical information to you, or you generate medical information about them, who is in charge of this medical information and who is allowed to use it for various purposes, right? So it establishes privacy standards, patients' rights, and the administrative requirements of now you have to take good care of this information such that it's not endangered beyond reason that their medical information could come out. You guys, I'm sure, already kind of have a bracket of like why we would have client confidentiality. Some of the super obvious extreme end is maybe somebody has a condition that they are embarrassed about, or that could impact their employment, or that could impact their relationships, and that information getting outside of your treatment room could damage other pieces of their lives. But more fundamentally, it's just a sense of security and stability in that, like, they're going to be able to give you more trust as their practitioner when they have a very clear sense of security about what you might share. In the same way as, like, if you're a little kid and you're like, will you be my best friend? I want to tell you a secret. If they go tell your secret, now that relationship connectivity is wounded, right? And so it's the same exact fundamental issue inside of human nature. We want the highest level of trust that we can have with our clients so that they can experience the highest level of relaxation, so that their nervous system can activate the highest state of healing, so that we can be the most efficient providers and supporters of their health process. So not all massage practices technically are impacted by HIPAA. This is something that people are often surprised about. Here in Hawaii, we are regulated under the Cosmetology and Barber and Consumer Affairs Board that is for service professionals. It's not necessarily overlapping with medical professionals. And so we actually don't have a standard HIPAA obligation. However, if you have any interface at all with insurance companies, that's going to automatically generate your HIPAA specific obligation. If you are interfacing with other practitioners, your HIPAA obligation is kind of triggered there because they're under HIPAA obligations. So you have to protect information that might be relevant or shared with other providers. Even if you are not obligated to the entirety of the Health Portability Act of 1996 specifically, as ethical practitioners, you still want to treat the medical records of your clients with the absolute utmost respect, right? Other people who are covered by HIPAA generally, doctors, clinics, psychologists, dentists, chiropractors, nursing homes, pharmacies, health insurance companies, health maintenance organizations, company health plans, insurance clearinghouses, government programs that pay for health care such as Medicare, Medicaid, military, veterans health care programs. So if you are interacting with any of those other people, your specific HIPAA obligations are escalated by that. Does that make sense? So the information that is specifically protected is the name of the client, the address of the client, the email address, the birth date, social security number, and that whole group of information is identifiable information. And then everything else connected to that, the specifics of their health care treatment, you have a smidge of flexibility in how you deal with it as long as it's completely not associated with the health information that is identifiable. So can you talk about that you had a client that had diabetes that progressed, period?
Yeah.
without their name, you can talk about it.
You can talk
Without
about
their
it.
identifying information,
Yeah.
you can discuss.
You could talk about that. What if you are giving a specific window of time?
It doesn't identify that person.
Doesn't identify that person. Could it possibly put that person into a little bit of a identifiable category?
If
Here's our
anybody
gray
has
area.
access to your appointment book.
Right. Yeah. If somebody can figure out when exactly that person was there, they may be able to cross-reference. So you start being a little more protective of specific timing of when you saw somebody. But the dates of treatment are not technically protected. So that can be in mind. Any protected health information, identifiable material at all, I would say keep that secret, keep it safe, right? Like loose lips sink ships. There's no reason to give identifiable protected health information to anybody that's not the insurance companies and the referring providers that you're working with. There's just no reason. You may, however, have times where for advertising purposes or for research purposes, there are details that happened with somebody where if you're divorcing that information from the identifiable information, you may find reasons to do that. And you'll just approach that with, again, the utmost care and professionalism. We live on a small island, and for that reason, it is very warranted to be more careful about the specific health information because lots of people know lots of other people, and if somebody really wanted to figure out who you were talking about, like they can cross-reference your Facebook or your Instagram or whatever and narrow it down pretty fast. And so you really don't want to put people in that position. Are people running around all the time trying to figure out who your clients are? Like, no. Like, don't freak out about it. But stay aware of the extra level of small community impact that we have on that material. When you are protecting information, you want to respect the chain of trust and you want to address data storage. So does a person know how to operate with your system, and is your system actually safe and secure? Okay. So you're going to obtain written consent, like we already talked about it in the intake process. You're going to protect the files that you have such that they're not like obvious and easily accessible to people who are just passing through your treatment room. There's no need to create easy access or temptation to people who might be nosy for various reasons. Appointment books are private. If you're using software to manage your treatments, you need to have password protection on the software. You need to have password protection on the computer generally if you have any files stored inside your computer that are relevant to your clients. And even in those cases where you may have like a story that you'd like to tell and you can separate it from the actual health information, be aware that it's not exactly your story. That doesn't mean you can never tell it, but anybody that you have ongoing relationship with in any way, reach out to them and ask if you can use their story and what they're comfortable with having shared. I sometimes have like bits of stories that I would like to share, especially as an instructor working with other massage therapists or in like attracting clients that have something kind of specific that I want to be able to speak to. I might have a really good example from a long, long time ago, and in those cases, I don't always hunt the person down. I may scramble, give them a fake name, give a timeline that is so generic that it's like whatever. It could be any time in the last 5 to 10 years. And just adjust enough details that I can get my point across, but kind of shear off I don't need to tell the complete nuances of other things that were going on with that person's life. If you can make it so that it's not entirely recognizable,
Yeah.
to that person themselves when they see this story. If there can be a bit of a question of like, oh, is she talking about me, but not like pin it down, then that's going to create a little bit more like safety for you in using that. And just
Psychic protection.
yeah, and I want you guys to feel like authorized to share your work and to be able to represent the amazing benefits and results that you've gotten with your clients, but just knowing how to navigate that. And then again, with like if you're decompressing with a family member or spouse or whatever that is, aware of your day-to-day life, and maybe you're wanting to share like, I was impacted by this situation that happened in the treatment room today. You still want to, as much as possible, kind of remove the identifying details just for that baseline sense of like the legality is one thing, but also that energetic protection of simply not being a person that is broadcasting everything that you acquire in your life, because it's not always your story to tell. Tell your story though, and don't be afraid to share what you reasonably can.
Well, I have a question about what a
Yes.
board is.
Yes.
Is it, my guess is that it's an entity, right, of like professionals in that field that oversee in some way the goings on of the community. And so the quizzes I've been taking that kind of review HIPAA,
Uh-huh.
they really want you to, I think, answer the question if your coworker comes up to you and starts talking about a case, what should you do? I think they want you to say, I would report them to the board, but I'm not sure. I don't know. Or I would report them to my boss. And like, not to say that it couldn't ever be inappropriate if someone's like, yeah, this Rebecca's here, and oh my god, like that's obviously inappropriate, especially if there's other clients in the room.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess what is the purpose of the board? How are they like managed? They get government funding.
Right, okay. So that's a big question, but let's circle through it really fast. But I want to also just address the like, if somebody else approaches you kind of thing. Like, if somebody else is sharing protected health information specifically, like, to my mind, you're not the boss of them. Like, that's their professional misstep and their professional problem, basically. But then you now have the information, and so it falls under your professional ethics where else it could go, right? So it's going to stop there. If you do feel like there's some kind of sense of endangerment of the client or whatever, like absolutely we want to protect our profession by reinforcing that. Realistically, like, yeah, you could report things to the board, but like if you actually want to improve the reality of what's going on in the world, like have the balls to say straight to that person's face, it's inappropriate to tell me this. That's going to be way more efficient. Yeah.
Just when they do it, it's like, hey,
yeah.
you really shouldn't say that.
Yeah, exactly. So to drop into the board, a board is just a group of people. Fundamentally, a board is a group of people that is choosing to gather together because they have some kind of shared objective, and they develop their own sets of strategies. A lot of times they'll use Robert's rules, which is pretty cool. I like Robert's rules, in order to kind of organize their own attempt to evoke some impact that they're trying to make, usually on the community, state, national level, whatever they're trying to do. So we have a state board in Hawaii. It falls under the Department of Consumer Consumer Affairs. And they meet kind of quarterly. They're elected / appointed. And honestly, like the range of authority that they have is fairly limited. They have the authority to approve and revoke licenses of individuals and of establishments. So we have the establishment license system here. So they'll spend a fair amount of their time having conversations about what recommendations they make to other legislative bodies that may have an impact on the massage profession, but they don't have a lot of direct impact on just changing the laws. Like they very rarely are inside of a range of, like they have an issue that they want to solve and they can just sit and vote on it in the board meeting and actually change something. Like it's more, what do we professionally coalesce around so that we can represent ourselves to the people who actually can do things beyond the licensing regulation. Then they'll review the licensing applications, stuff like that. We also have professional boards. So that's the state board that actually is directly, like it is in the government. So it's our professional regulation system inside of the Hawaii state government. And states individually have their boards if they have any regulation on massage therapy at all. Some of them still don't. There are groups that have big impact on the national level, but there's not really a body that regulates massage therapy from the federal level. So the state board is actually what matters for your day-to-day life. Then there's also professional boards, which are like inside of the various agencies that are made up of massage therapists that for whatever reason are supporting each other. Then those boards have whatever budget and authority is given to them by the agency at large. And so those are often elected positions as well, but they happen inside of the professional organization. So like I'm involved in AMTA, I like it. It's pretty much the biggest, most influential actual professional board for like on a national level. And they have chapters inside of every state. So those chapters have elected positions and a certain amount of money based on their membership, but it's managed from within the professional organization itself. And so people who are massage therapists that are not involved in AMTA have really no specific impact on what those state chapters do. Although the state chapters are pretty motivated to, like be inclusive and try to influence the expression of our profession even beyond their specific regulatory or logistical goals. So that is pretty cool. So here we have basically, I would say that's the two that are worth knowing about. There are a few other professional agencies, but AMTA is the only group that has like boots on the ground chapter representation in the state.
And not the day-to-day interaction. Like
Right.
They're there.
Yeah. So that's our big overview on professionalism from that angle of like as we navigate bringing in clients, setting reasonable expectations, and living up to the natural and legal expectations that we have as providers. Next time that we gather up, we'll be diving a little bit more into some like ethical considerations, standards of practice, professionalism stuff. We'll have kind of one more day of that. And then we'll be diving back into some of the more practical aspects of our professional existence. So let's go ahead and take just a moment to let that all integrate and settle in the body. Just recharge your system, let all that high verbal, cognitive data processing drop energy back down into your system, back down through your core. Fill it through the root chakra, navel chakra, solar plexus, heart. throat, third eye, and crown. And just sweep those waves up and through. Get yourselves prepared to digest comfortably. Maybe take a moment to check in on the different systems of your body. Just to remember your ways of feeling. The feelings of your integumentary system. The feelings of your digestive system. Notice the nervous system. Notice your skeleton. You're getting faster and faster at being able to switch your focused attention in this embodied state. Go into the muscle system. Ease off any tension that's existing there. Endocrine system, perhaps for a moment. Those molecules of emotion. And just give a big blessing on all of your individual cells. All 3 trillion tiny entities that make up you. And return to the surface of the skin, return to the room. All right, nicely done, everybody.
Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you. And I'll see you next week.